Farming is normally a family affair, and when you bring families together and you combine money and finances and farming and everything like that, you are inevitably going to run into challenges. And inside today's video, we're going to talk about what some of those challenges are and how you can ultimately overcome them. So let's get started. Now, the first and major issue that really just causes a lot of problems in the family farm operations is the inability or unwillingness for us to actually have the hard conversations that we need to have. The majority of family farm operations, including my own when I was growing up and the things I witnessed there, is people wanted to avoid having those hard conversations. I'll give you an example of my granddad and my father. They would get into contradictions and confrontations all the time, right? On what we should be doing around the feed yard, how things should be done. My granddad was notorious for end running my dad, which means my dad would get the entire team set up for the day. And then my granddad would come in and basically end run the entire thing, meaning he would go to the team and tell them to do something different. Obviously, if you are trying to trust your kids to run a part of the operation like my dad was, and then, father comes in and messes up the entire plant, that is inevitably going to cause a lot of confrontation and a lot of problems there. Now, the thing is, though, is that my dad and my granddad didn't want to have those hard conversations, or if one of them tried to start to have a crucial conversation, is what I'll call it, the other one would step away because they don't want to have that conversation. They want to avoid basically the energy in those conversations because it is uncomfortable, right? And I totally get that, and I can totally see that. Now, the thing is, though, is that these conversations would end up in relentless fights that would last for 3 to 4 months. And it's just kind of amazing to me that my granddad and my dad would be around each other for months at a time after having a fight and not say one word to each other for weeks or months. And this happens again and again after bringing in hundreds of family farm operations into legacy farm over the past 5 years. This is just a common occurrence. Now, if you're one of those family farm operations where everybody gets along and everything like that, great, good for you. I'm happy that that works that way. I'm just telling you that for 99% of operations in this country, there is going to be family feuds that happen. Now, the thing is, though, is how do we combat this? A majority of people, when we look at going to have a crucial conversation with somebody, or really just a hard conversation, what we're scared of is a fight, right? And the fight ultimately ends up in people going separate ways, right? Getting pissed off, getting angry, saying things they regret, and they ultimately go their separate ways. And what you need to change is your frame and mindset when you enter the conversation. If you are entering it from a place of, man, this is just going to be a fight, then you're already entering it from the wrong place here, in my opinion. Now, one thing that we talk about in Legacy Farmer is this concept called collision brings clarity. Instead of going to have a fight, essentially, with the person that you need to inside the operation, call it a collision, right? And a collision, the definition of a collision from this context is, hey, we're going to talk about some hard things, but know that my goal here is to get to an end result that is a win-win for both of us, right? I'm not coming here just because I'm only trying to fulfill my selfish needs. I'm trying to fulfill your needs as well, so that we can come to a common agreement here and a common solution and common resolution here, so that we can move the business forward. And when you approach it that way, it just changes everything about the dynamic of that conversation. And just by calling it a collision versus, hey, a hard conversation or a crucial conversation, hey, we're going to collide over some of these things that have been happening, but know, again, that the definition of a collision from this context is we want to find a resolution at the end of this conversation. This will completely change the approach of both parties when they step into this conversation. The next piece here, it really involves around accountability when it comes to family farm operations. Very few people are willing to take accountability for whatever problems pop up inside the operation here. It's really easy for us to place blame. And so again, I'm going to use my family as an example here. When my parents had to go through bankruptcy, they ultimately had to go through this terrible experience. It was terrible, guys. It was extremely difficult for them. If you can picture, my dad sacrificing his entire life essentially to build the feed yard inside of our operation from basically age 5 to age 45 when it closed down. He basically sacrificed and chose to dedicate his life there when he had all these other opportunities. He could have left Tribune, Kansas. He could have went and done other things with his life. And him and my mom chose to stay back and raise their family there and really want to build the legacy for the family operation. Now, imagine how they felt when everything got ripped away. And the thing is everything got ripped away from them, and they had to file Chapter 7 bankruptcy and lose their life's work, not because of the decisions they made. Now, what do I mean by this? It's really easy, and I can totally understand it for my dad after all of this happened to be in a place of blaming everybody else, right? Because reality is there were decisions being made in the office and stuff like that my dad was not aware of and was not a part of, quite frankly, that ultimately led to the financial destruction of the operation. So you can understand, hopefully, his resentment towards other family members and really my granddad around what things were happening inside the office. And, my dad was interviewed back in 2020 when we did the Saving the American Farmer documentary. One thing that he wished he would have done, and this is what he says on camera, is I should have asked more financial questions. I shouldn't have just trusted. I should have asked, and I should have taken the time to really understand what was happening with, him and my mom's balance sheet, their money, their life's work, and things like that. Now, the issue here, though, too, is even in that situation, my dad could sit in a place of blame and essentially be a victim for a long time. But the reality is, though, is even though it wasn't his fault that all of this happened, it was still his responsibility. And what I mean by that is just him simply saying, I should have asked more questions, is him starting to take responsibility and accountability for the position that ultimately him and my mom ended up in and that our family ended up in. And that's what I mean here, right? Even though all these things can happen inside of a family operation or just any business in general, even though you may not be the one that triggered or took the action that triggered that event to take place, it's still, if it's impacting you, it's your responsibility still to make sure that you have things in place to protect yourself from those type of variables and things that could come into play in business. This happens all the time here, but even though it's not your fault, it's still your responsibility, right? And to make sure you're managing things, make sure you're really thinking through things, considering second, third, and fourth order consequences or outcomes from decisions that are being made, considering what decisions everybody else is making in the operation, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, because you really have to think from a comprehensive or high level around what decisions everybody in the operation is making and how those could impact you, even if you have nothing to do with them. It is still our responsibility as business owners to consider all the variables around us. And once you take ownership over that, once you take accountability for that, your life will become so much easier when it comes to leading the operation or leading an organization, whatever it is that you are leading in your life, your family, for example. It's probably pretty important. Now, the next piece here that I'm going to bring up, and this is kind of a delicate topic here as well, but a lot of people feel trapped inside of these family operations. What do I mean by that? I've had several customers come into Legacy Farm over the years, and one of the common occurrences is they are the son or daughter that went back to the operation, and they feel trapped. They feel like they can't leave. And the thing is they constantly get pulled back into the operation. They're getting angry about the position that they're in, or they were made promises that they were going to get equity or assets or responsibility, and 2 decades have passed and that they haven't gotten anything. Right. So this can cause obviously a lot of resentment there, but we get to the point, and those people get to the point to where they're ready to make a change and ultimately step out of the operation. But for some reason, they always get pulled back in. And this is where I'm going to talk about people having control over you when you don't want them to, or you don't even recognize that they have it. Now, again, I'm going to use my granddad as an example. My granddad knew what things to say to trigger everybody around him, specifically his kids and specifically my dad. Now, the problem with this is when somebody knows how to control your emotions, they will control your actions. Okay. And what I mean by that, I'll use an example is like marriage, for example. I know exactly what I need to say to trigger my wife or piss her off, just like you probably do with your spouse or your siblings or your parents or whatever that is. When you work this close with family, you're going to learn what triggers the other person. And the thing is, though, is that when that person, whether it's your parents or whoever's in charge of the operation, can say things that will trigger you, they ultimately control your emotions. And this is where you have to turn internally and start developing this level of awareness and understanding how you respond to specific situations and how you respond to specific triggers that people are saying to you, so that you can get a hold of what's going on in here. You have to have some level of ability to keep yourself composed when these situations are happening. And the reason I'm talking about this is because a lot of our members that have come in over the years that were in this situation, it took them a couple years to really start to analyze and again, look internally here and monitor their emotions and have the level of awareness to say, okay, great. I know that stepping into this conversation that my dad or my mom is going to say this, or whoever it is, I'm just using those people as an example. My mom or my dad is going to say this, and I know historically that would trigger me. I'm not going to let that happen today because I've done enough internal work to have the awareness to regulate and control my emotions and my responses there. That has been what has separated our members from this toxic family operation that they feel trapped in, again, that they need to get away from. And so if you're in that type of situation, you really have to start turning internally and looking at how you have responded to these triggers in the past and really starting to understand your emotions, how you take in information, what your reactions have been, so that you can start to make the changes that you need to, so you no longer feel trapped inside the operation. And this is when you can finally start living the life of freedom and choice that you've been wanting for a long time, most likely. All right, guys, now the next piece here that we're going to talk about is a concept and really just a statement around you can't change the wind, but you can adjust your sails. Now, again, going back to and kind of piggybacking off of people feeling trapped inside of an operation, you don't have to feel like that forever, right? Again, you got to monitor your emotions, everything we are talking about. You got to develop this level of internal awareness and how you respond to things so that you can correct these things here. But a lot of people, though, too, they feel guilty if they want to do something else that is different than what the family operation has done. And I'll again use my dad as an example. He sacrificed his life and years of choices that he could have done something completely different because he wanted to carry on the family legacy of the operation. And totally, kind of a great idea there and a noble idea there, and something that a lot of families are doing inside this industry today. But I want to really open up just this other perspective for you, and that it's okay to do something different. And to be honest, you should do something different, because a lot of family members that are coming back into the operation, the parents are really struggling in how to teach them to think about the operation from a business owner perspective. You can't teach somebody to think like a business owner. Really developing those skill sets and those mindsets to lead and build a business, and also understanding the financial weight and responsibility of that seat, is only learned through experience, not from somebody teaching it to you, right? And so that's why I feel doing something on your own, and maybe it's not, you're completely not separating yourself all the way from the operation, but maybe you're building a business that runs alongside it, right? Or some type of custom service business there, so that you can develop these skill sets. And what I mean by that, though, and the benefit of this is, one, you're going to be doing something on your own, and it's okay to do that. I want to tell you that. But two, you're going to be developing these skill sets that you just wouldn't get inside of the business. And so if you're in this position where there's just holes, right, in your ability to lead a business, or you don't have the skill sets that you need to, I'm going to tell you it's okay to adjust your sails and do something different than what the overall family operation is doing. And you will be better off long-term for doing that. You just have to have the courage to do that. Now, if there's a situation where the family operation is not going in the direction that you want, then you definitely should adjust your sails. And there's no reason that you should feel bad about doing that when the pathway that the family business is going is not going to lead you to the type of results that you want for your life and your family and your legacy as well. So I'm not telling you to be selfish. What I'm telling you is to act out of self-interest, which means you're going to do what's best for you so that you can better impact the lives of those around you, which is going to be first your family and your kids. But then after that, it's going to be other parts of the family business, or even people inside of your community as well. All right, guys. Now, the last point in this video is built around this concept that strong character is only built in hard times. Now, as parents, and as a parent myself, the number one most detrimental thing that we can do to our kids is to protect them at all costs, right? And not let them go through hard, challenging times. But the reality is, if you're watching this video and you've built your entire business on your own, guaranteed you went through some very, very difficult times, right? Or maybe you're a second generation, third generation, guaranteed the first generation of that operation went through some very difficult times. And that is where strong character is built. That is where you develop these skill sets and these mindsets as a business owner to push through adversity. Because when it comes to building a business, and not just cruising, but literally building, meaning you are expanding your team, you're expanding your acres, you're expanding the operation, you're expanding your debt load, you're expanding your cash flow, you're expanding your responsibility and the weight that you feel trying to carry this business, you are inevitably going to face those hard times. So what I'm going to share with you is just this idea to not shy away from those. And when you are going through a hard time, don't let it just completely destroy you. And I know that's hard for me to, that's hard to get through, and it's easy for me to say that. But the reality is, we got to look at that hard time or that challenging time that we're going through for what it is. And that is where all the growth is happening for you. I truly believe that God puts us through these difficult times in our life, especially as a business owner, because he is getting us and building us into the person that is ready and prepared to handle for what he is bringing into our future. And right now, the person you are right now, you may not be ready for what he has, what doors he's ready to open for us. You may have to go through these hardships to, again, build the character and build really just the persistence and perseverance and everything that you need to be as a business owner in order to step through those doors that he's ready to open for you in the future. And until you do that, until you go through this hardship, until you just surrender and accept the journey, right, and really just look at it for what it is, you're not going to reach the level of success that he has planned for you, because you're not willing to go through the hard times here. Now, again, I talk about us using our kids and protecting our kids too much, and we will not allow our kids to develop into the level of people that God has intended for them to be if we are stuck in our ways of trying to protect them from any hardships in their own life. All right, guys, so that concludes today's video. I hope some of these talking points here were super valuable for you and made you think differently about yourself, your life, your operation, and really what you're building there, because I do want all of these videos to definitely be valuable to you if you were taking the time to watch them. So thank you again for joining, my friends. Subscribe below if you haven't yet, and we'll catch you on the next video.